Hi sewing friends, I'm working on hand quilting my 9-patch snowball quilt. I thought I'd show you a little bit how I do that. I think a couple of weeks ago you may have seen a video of how we put the big stitches in to get this quilt basted together. All these big ugly white stitches will be removed when I'm done, but I needed to put a lot of stitches in because I'm not using a hoop to quilt this. I'm using a large embroidery, not a large embroidery needle, but it's an embroidery needle which is larger than a quilting needle, and I'm using pearl cotton number 8. I'm using red and black right now, and I'd kind of like to add some gold in some of these black and green snowballs. I thought that would be nice. So these snowballs are not typical because the seams don't match. If you watch my video when I made these, I didn't worry about matching seams, so they're a little wonky. I think it's a fun way to make a quilt when you want to have it a little bit unexpected. There's an unexpected element to that. So I've done a few snowballs and I'm starting in the middle of the quilt. And one other little fact is that I'm using a black batting because there's quite a bit of black in the quilt, and I have a big black border with the applique. So I bought some black Hobbs batting 80/20, and that I think was the only black batting I could find. I like to use lighter batting or wool batting, or I have used polyester as well when I'm hand quilting. Some of the thicker battings do not work well with hand quilting. So I'll show you how I'm doing this. Well, maybe first I should tell you how I was going to do it. I had imagined I would start, let's say here, and I would go across sort of in a zigzag line so that I didn't have to keep moving my quilt. But I got going and realized I really just needed to go around each of the snowballs separately. So that's what I'm doing, which means I have to turn the quilt quite a little bit more time consuming. So let's start in one of these snowballs. I need to get my left hand behind where I'm going to work, and I'll probably start right here in this one. So I enter, sorry about that, I enter an inch or so away from where I want to begin and come out a 1/4 inch away from the seam. That's my quilting line, my imaginary line that I did not mark. And I'm going to just make 2 or 3 stitches, and I'm trying to make them the same size. That's the most important thing with quilting. I don't think we need to measure how big they are, but they should look uniform. So there's a few stitches on that side, and then I turn the quilt just a little bit, and my left hand is behind the quilt, kind of making sure that the backing is smooth as I go, and my needle goes in and kind of touches my finger. Yeah, my left finger kind of helps a little bit guide me as I go. And here I'll need to turn my quilt, and I'll need to get my, and I just want to make sure the back is smooth. It should be pretty smooth because I put a lot of basting stitches in. I'm on my table, and my table really, holds the weight of the quilt, which is nice. Okay, I'm going to turn one more time. I'm going to put my needle right here, kind of turn this around so that I can go from right to left, which is so much easier, and I hope you can see. what I'm doing. I kind of rock back and forth. Everybody finds their own way to do this. I think the keys are to keep your quilt, you know, you want your layers to be smooth and you want your stitches to be uniform. And other than that, you get to do it any way you want. I tried quilting with a hoop once upon a time and it was way too cumbersome for me. I couldn't seem to get it. And I don't want a stationary quilting frame because I like handwork to go with me when I'm going places, whether it's visiting family or, you know, going to the park. So here we are, pretty close to the end. I'll do one more stitch here, come out, and I want to put a knot in this. So I'm going to put a knot in my thread a tiny bit away from the fabric, and I'm going to put one last stitch in. So I want a little bit of thread, enough for one stitch, and I'm going to go in, and I'm inside the quilt. I'm not on the back, I'm inside the batting with the batting, and I'm going to come out over here, and I'm going to try to pull that knot inside the quilt. You can kind of hear it pop when you're sitting with it here. And then I'm going to cut that off, take my needle, and just push that stitch inside the quilt. So I have finished one of my snowballs with red thread, and you can see I've got a whole lot more to do, but it really doesn't take that long to get around one snowball. And when I have a whole bunch done, I might take out some of these ugly stitches just so I can look at the quilt and see how pretty it is. But I wanted to show you how I do my hand stitching and my hand quilting on this quilt, and happy sewing, friends.